So that photo, it's a pretty famous one that, like, of the photos that I chose that I might have expected more people to have seen than some of the other ones. And often when we think about the Holocaust, it's like, you know, concentration camps and labor and gas chambers, but that kind of doesn't get to the idea that the Germans were very creative and used many different ways to try to eliminate the Jews of Europe. And one of their first sort of implementations of what they called the final solution was the Einsatzgruppe, or mobile killing units, they were just like trained forces that would go around town to town and round up all the Jews in an area, and they would just shoot them to death. Often, like in that photo, they just shoot them and they would fall right into the pit that they dug. Sometimes they'd still be alive. And it was pretty, obviously very like gruesome and horrifying, but it was just seen as like this sort of systemic thing that they were doing. And so I think that photo is one of the best representations of that particular way that the Germans would go after Jewish citizens. And it happened all over Eastern Europe, and a lot of times they were in towns where there were also non-Jewish citizens. So in those countries, I often kind of getting back to the idea of what other people know. I don't think there's much that they could have done, but just like have such a large population of your town just gone like that would have been pretty jarring. And I mean, I guess some people might have not been against it, but probably there were a lot of people who were sort of helpless to watch as this happened. And even though they weren't the victims, were affected by it as well. So when I see the victim's face, I see like obviously a lot of fear, but also a certain degree of just like, not necessarily acceptance, but the idea of an inevitability, because it wasn't like he was the first person. Like he was sitting above a pit of a lot of his sort of counterparts, his fellow Jewish citizens had already been killed. And so that's also what's striking to me about that photo, is beyond how terrified he looks, how like he just seems to understand that there's nothing he can do to stop it, which is chilling in his own way. But also how there's just like a crowd of the Germans behind him, even though there's really only one person who's needed to do the killing. Maybe they would want to have a couple other people just in case he tried to run away, but there's really no need for that kind of spectacle. And that's kind of what it was made into. It wasn't just like, on one hand I was talking about how it is like a systematic thing, but it was also like truly something that was sort of celebrated and made into like a look at what's going on. And also how that was something that was documented, was clearly this is something that the Germans wanted to have as a record. They weren't necessarily hiding it from history. They were hiding it from other people at the time, other countries who were their enemies in the war, but they wanted to have something as a record after the war for their success, to be like, look at what we did. So it kind of shows that there wasn't, at least on the part of the Nazis themselves, there wasn't a lot of shame, that they were proud of what they were doing, and it was like they wanted people to see.